The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the rugged cliff edge, painting the Pacific horizon in hues of orange and purple. Hilda leaned into Henry, her hand finding his, a familiar comfort after 40 years of marriage, as Damian and Melissa stood a respectful distance behind them, seemingly admiring the view. "Another perfect anniversary," Hilda whispered, her gaze sweeping over the vast, shimmering ocean, a feeling of profound contentment settling deep within her. Henry squeezed her hand, a quiet smile gracing his lips, a testament to their enduring love and the beautiful family they had built. Suddenly, a sharp, unexpected shove from behind sent them stumbling forward, their feet scrabbling for purchase on the loose gravel. Hilda's breath hitched, her eyes wide with disbelief as she twisted, catching a fleeting glimpse of Damian's cold, unyielding face, Melissa's hand still outstretched. The ground vanished beneath them, the world tilting violently as the roar of the ocean surged upwards, swallowing their gasps. They tumbled, a horrifying, sickening freefall, the wind tearing at their clothes, the jagged rocks below rushing into terrifying focus. In that terrifying plummet, Hilda's last thought was not of death, but of the monstrous, unreadable betrayal in her son's eyes. The icy spray of the waves reached them just before the impact. A final, chilling embrace from the abyss. A family's bond is meant to be an unbreakable shield. But what happens when the very hands meant to protect you betray you? The crisp morning air, once invigorating, now felt like a cruel irony as the earth gave way beneath Hilda's feet. A jarring force, a sudden, inexplicable shove from behind, sent her lurching forward, gravity asserting its brutal dominion. Her husband, Henry, was propelled alongside her, a silent, shared descent into the unknown. The world spun into a blur of gray rock, and the tumultuous fear, sharp and immediate, pierced through the initial shock, a primal scream caught in her throat. Her body tensed, bracing for an impact that promised only destruction. Below, the jagged coastline rose to meet them with terrifying speed, each rock a potential grave marker. A desperate, fleeting thought of their children, of the life they had built, flashed through her mind, a tragic counterpoint to their current plummet. The wind roared past her ears, a mournful lament for the life they were losing. She caught a glimpse of Henry's face, a mask of grim determination, his. The impact was a symphony of agony, bone against rock, a brutal symphony that stole Hilda's breath. She lay crumpled amidst the sharp stones and sparse, hardy shrubs, a searing pain radiating through her entire being. Every breath was a shallow, agonizing gasp, her vision blurring at the edges. Next to her, Henry lay eerily still, a crimson stain spreading across his charcoal. Just as despair threatened to consume her, his lips moved, barely audible above the crashing waves. His voice, a raw, strained whisper, carried a command that defied their horrific reality. "Hilda, don't move. Play dead." The words were a lifeline, a desperate strategy born of unimaginable fear and a sudden, terrifying understanding. A shadow fell over them, and the distinct sound of footsteps crunching on loose rock approached from above. Through half-lidded tint against the bright sky, their silence more chilling than any shout. The instinct for survival, ignited by Henry's whisper, took root, compelling her battered body to remain utterly motionless. Weeks before the cliff, a tense silence had begun to fester around their Sunday dinner table, a stark contrast to the lively gatherings of years past. Hilda meticulously arranged a platter of roasted vegetables, her hands betraying none of the apprehension she felt. Damian and Melissa sat opposite them, their usual easy banter replaced by clipped responses and furtive glances. Henry, ever the peacemaker, attempted a light-hearted story about an old neighbor, but his words landed in a heavy, echoing void. A subtle shift in their children's demeanor had become undeniable, a coldness that pricked at Hilda's maternal instincts. Melissa's elegant composure seemed to mask a simmering impatience, while Damian's... The air grew thick with unspoken resentments and concealed agendas, making the simple act of sharing a meal feel like a perilous negotiation. Hilda felt a creeping dread, an unsettling premonition that something precious was irrevocably breaking beneath the polished surface of their family life. Hours bled into an eternity as Hilda and Henry lay still, the sun beginning its slow descent, painting the cliff face in hues of orange and The sound of Damian and Melissa's footsteps eventually receded, their departure a chilling confirmation of their heinous intent. Only when the silence truly settled, heavy and vast, did Henry stir, his movement slow and agonizing. He pulled himself closer to Hilda, his breath ragged, his voice raspy with pain and a profound sorrow. He pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of comfort amidst the desolation, and then began to speak. Each word a heavy stone dropped into the quiet. He spoke of a secret, meticulously guarded for a quarter of a century, a truth that had shadowed their lives, unbeknownst to Hilda. The revelation was not of an external threat, but of something rotten at the very core of their cherished family. The confession was a betrayal far deeper than the physical assault, an emotional wound that threatened to eclipse her physical injuries. As Henry whispered the horrifying details, Hilda felt the perfect family she had cherished for 40 years crumble into dust around her, leaving only the bitter taste of deceit and an unbearable, soul-shattering question. Who were her children, really? The revelation hung heavy in the salty air, each word from Henry a fresh wound on Hilda's already shattered spirit. The physical pain from the fall, once all-consuming, now felt secondary to the agony of a heart betrayed by its own flesh and blood. She stared at the relentless waves, each crash mirroring the tumultuous storm raging within her. How could she have been so blind, so utterly oblivious to the darkness festering within her son? Every shared laugh, every proud glance, every tender moment from his childhood replayed in her mind, now tainted by this chilling truth. The perfect family portrait she had meticulously painted over decades had been violently torn apart, revealing a grotesque, hidden canvas beneath. Her husband's hand, warm and reassuring, found hers, a silent anchor in the swirling chaos of her thoughts. Yet, even his touch couldn't quell the earthquake of doubt that shook her very foundation. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, casting the cliff face in long, ominous shadows, mirroring the dread that enveloped her. They were broken, not just physically, but irrevocably. A deep chill, colder than the night air, settled in her bones as she grappled with the enormity of what they had just escaped. The memory of Damian's small, determined face, illuminated by the flickering glow of a birthday candle, now felt like a cruel deception. Hilda recalled a particular incident from his youth, a seemingly innocuous argument over a broken toy that had escalated into an unnerving display of cold calculation in his young. At the time, she had dismissed it as a phase, a childish tantrum, excusing it with the logic of youthful impulsiveness. But now, with Henry's devastating confession echoing in her ears, that memory twisted into something sinister, a dark premonition she had unknowingly ignored. Her mind raced, replaying countless fragments of their shared past, searching for other missed signals, other moments where the subtle cracks in Damian's facade might have been visible. Each recollection brought a fresh wave of nausea, blurring the lines between the loving son she thought she knew and the stranger who had pushed them to their near demise. The weight of her past naivety pressed down on her, a suffocating burden of regret and disbelief. Days blurred into a hazy continuum of pain and gnawing uncertainty, as Hilda and Henry sought refuge in a secluded, abandoned shack nestled deep within a forgotten cove. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay, a fitting reflection of their current reality. Henry, despite his own injuries, moved with a quiet strength, tending to their wounds with a makeshift first aid kit he'd salvaged from their shattered memories. Hilda watched him, a silent observer to his unwavering resolve, but her own spirit felt frayed, battling not just the physical discomfort, but the psychological trauma of knowing their children's true nature. The secret Henry had unveiled created an impenetrable wall between them and their past, reshaping every memory, every tender moment, into a potential lie. Her heart ached with a profound loneliness, a sense of isolation far deeper than their physical solitude. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within her soul, a relentless downpour washing away any lingering illusions of safety or family loyalty. Each drop on the corrugated iron roof was a painful reminder of their new, precarious existence. The decision, when it finally came, was heavy with the weight of their shattered trust and newfound resolve. They couldn't go to the police, not yet. The very thought of exposing their children, of unraveling the intricate web of deceit that had entangled their lives for so long, felt too dangerous, too raw. The secret Henry had whispered held implications far beyond a simple act of attempted murder, a darkness that needed careful, strategic unveiling. Hilda felt a surge of cold fury, replacing the initial shock and despair. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding, about justice, about reclaiming the narrative of their lives from the treacherous hands of their own offspring. They had to be smart, to think like hunters, not victims. The path forward was murky, fraught with peril, but a nascent strength began to stir within Hilda. She looked at Henry, his crucible of betrayal. A new chapter of their lives had begun, one where the hunters would become the hunted, as they prepared to confront the very people who had tried to erase them. The meager light filtering through the grimy window of the shack cast long, wavering shadows across Hilda's face, as she traced the lines of a faded map spread on the dusty floor. Each contour, each dotted path, represented not just physical terrain, but the treacherous landscape of their shattered family. The truth Henry had revealed, a terrible secret kept for 25 years, was a heavy cloak draped over their every thought, chilling them far more than the sea breeze seeping through the gaps in the walls. They meticulously analyzed old photographs, not with nostalgia, but with a forensic intensity, searching for hidden meanings in smiles and glances that now seemed utterly deceptive. Every joyful memory was reevaluated, tainted by the chilling knowledge of Damian's true nature and the silent complicity that had allowed such darkness to fester. The weight of their past naivety pressed down on them, a suffocating burden of regret. The silence in the shack was punctuated only by the distant roar of the ocean, a constant reminder of their narrow escape and the terrifying reality of their son's betrayal. This was a battle for their very souls, not just their lives. Henry's gaze lingered on Hilda's pained expression, his heart aching with the burden of what he had withheld for so long. His mind drifted back years, to a seemingly ordinary afternoon when Damian was just a boy, brimming with an unsettling intensity. He remembered watching Damian, perhaps 10 years old, in the schoolyard, not playing with the boisterous abandon of other children, but meticulously orchestrating a complex scheme to win a seemingly trivial game. There was a cold, calculating glint in his young. At the time, he had attributed it to nascent intelligence, a budding ambition, dismissing the flicker of disquiet as an overprotective father's worry. But now, that memory felt like a chilling premonition, a roadmap to the callous act at the cliff. He saw the genesis of the manipulator, the seeds of the betrayal sown long ago, blossoming into the monstrous act they had barely survived. The realization that he had seen it, dismissed it, and ultimately failed to act on it, was a torment worse than any physical wound. A subtle shift in the air, a faint disturbance in the dust motes dancing in the sliver of sunlight, caught Hilda's attention. A twig snapped outside, too close for comfort, shattering the fragile peace of their hiding place. The quiet rustle of dried leaves, distinct from the rhythmic crash of the waves, sent a jolt of primal fear through her. Their sanctuary, they realized with a chilling certainty, was compromised. A cold dread seeped into her bones, replacing the weariness of their injuries. They were being hunted. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every creak of the old shack intensified, transforming their refuge into a cage. The thought of Damian and Melissa, knowing their location, their cold, calculating faces etched in her mind, ignited a fierce, protective instinct. They had to move, to vanish once more into the unforgiving landscape, before their pursuers closed in. The clock was ticking, each second a precious, fading commodity in their desperate bid for survival and justice. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of deep orange and violet, Hilda and Henry prepared to leave the shack, their movements swift and silent. They clutched their few salvaged belongings, their hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against their ribs. The path they had chosen led through a dense thicket, offering cover but also obscuring their vision. A sudden glint of metal, almost imperceptible in the fading light, caught Henry's eye from behind a cluster of gnarled trees. It was the familiar, polished silver of his own watch, the one he wore for decades, now casually adorning Damian's wrist. Damian, standing partially concealed, his head tilted slightly, an unnervingly calm expression on his face, was observing the shack. Beside him, Melissa's silhouette was unmistakable, her long... The realization hit Hilda like a physical blow. They were not just being watched, they were cornered. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had just stumbled into a deadly trap, their very presence confirming their survival to those who sought their demise. Hilda's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and adrenaline as Damian's cold gaze locked onto the shack. Melissa's elegant silhouette, now a harbinger of dread, stood beside him, her composure unnerving. They were trapped, exposed, the dense thicket offering insufficient cover against their children's calculated pursuit. A desperate glance passed between Hilda and Henry, a silent acknowledgement of their dire predicament. Every instinct screamed for them to run, but where? The cliff loomed behind them, the treacherous terrain a constant threat, and now their own son blocked their escape. Henry's grip tightened on Hilda's hand, a silent promise of protection amidst the growing despair. A sudden idea sparked in Hilda's mind, a risky gamble born of sheer desperation. She pointed towards a pile of dried leaves and debris near the shack's entrance, then subtly nudged a loose stone with her foot. The stakes were impossibly high, their lives hanging in the balance, but inaction was no longer an option. They had to create a distraction, a momentary chaos to slip through the net that was closing around them. The silence was broken only by the distant roar of the ocean, a stark contrast to the thundering fear in their chests. A small, controlled blaze erupted from the pile of debris near the shack, sending a plume of acrid smoke into the twilight air. The sudden crackle and the smell of burning wood were enough to draw Damian and Melissa's attention, their figures momentarily silhouetted against the flickering light as they turned towards the disturbance. Seizing the precious seconds of distraction, Hilda and Henry moved, their battered bodies protesting with every strained muscle, but their will pushing them forward. They plunged deeper into the dense undergrowth, the thorny branches tearing at their already ruined clothes, the sharp leaves scratching there. The sounds of their children's alarmed shouts faded behind them, replaced by the pounding of their own footsteps and the frantic beat of their hearts. They didn't know where they were going, only that they had to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the hunters. The moon, a sliver of silver, offered little illumination as they stumbled through the treacherous terrain, fueled by a primal need for survival. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow, seemed to hold the thread of discovery, making their escape a desperate race against time. They pressed on, their lungs burning, driven by the horrifying truth of their children's intent. They found a small, almost hidden alcove beneath a massive, ancient banyan tree, its roots forming a natural, protective labyrinth. Hidden within the gnarled embrace of the banyan tree's roots, Hilda slumped against the rough bark, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The physical exhaustion was immense, but it paled in comparison to the emotional torment. The image of Damian's face, cold and calculating, still observing the shack, replayed in her mind, shattering any lingering illusions of his innocence. This wasn't a child who had made a mistake. This was a man who had meticulously planned their demise and was now actively hunting them. The thought sent a shiver of ice through her veins, a profound grief for the son she had lost, replaced by a terrifying stranger. Henry, ever watchful, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his own weariness evident, but overshadowed by his unwavering resolve. He knew she was breaking, the truth of their son's depravity finally settling into the deepest parts of her soul. The forest sounds, once comforting, now felt menacing, each rustle a potential threat, each distant animal cry a reminder of their precarious existence. How could she ever trust anyone again, knowing that her own flesh and blood had orchestrated such a heinous betrayal? The weight of it threatened to crush her, leaving her hollow and despairing. As the first faint light of dawn began to pierce through the dense canopy, painting the forest in hues of gray and soft to retrieve, it contained a few essentials, salvaged hastily from the shack, a testament to their hurried escape. Among the items, his fingers brushed against something unexpected, tucked deep into a hidden pocket of his torn. It was a small, folded piece of paper, aged and creased, a forgotten relic from a life now shattered. He carefully unfolded it, his brow furrowing in concentration as he recognized the familiar handwriting. It was a receipt, dated 25 years ago, for a substantial deposit into an offshore account, bearing an unfamiliar company name but a very familiar signature, Damian's. A cold wave washed over Henry. This was concrete proof, the missing piece connecting their son's long-ago deceit to their near-fatal fall. The implications were staggering. revealing a deeper, more intricate plot than even he had imagined. He showed it to Hilda. The initial betrayal was only the beginning. A far more sinister motive lay beneath the surface. The receipt, a seemingly innocuous scrap of paper, now held the power to unravel everything. The crumpled receipt, clutched in Henry's hand, felt like a branding iron against Hilda's palm. Its innocuous appearance belied the chilling truth it held, a quarter-century-old testament to a meticulously crafted deception. This was no impulsive act of violence. It was the culmination of a long game, a financial scheme so vast it made their attempted murder seem like a mere detail in a larger, sinister plan. The weight of this realization pressed down on Hilda, a suffocating blanket of betrayal that solidified the image of Damian as a calculating stranger, not the loving son she had nurtured. Every joyful memory of his childhood now seemed a carefully constructed lie, a performance designed to mask the darkness within. Henry's gaze, grim and resolute, met hers, a silent acknowledgement of the new, colder battle they faced. The sun climbed higher, indifferent to the profound shift in their world, revealing the full horror of their son's long-term avarice. This secret held for so long had not just shadowed their lives, it had poisoned them from the inside out. They were no longer just survivors. They were unwitting witnesses to a generational crime. The revelation of the offshore account ignited a fierce resolve within Hilda, replacing despair with a cold, burning determination. They couldn't just hide. They had to understand the full architecture of Damian's deceit, to dismantle the empire built on their unsuspecting trust. The banyan tree, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, holding them back from the truth. A dangerous, calculated plan began to form, a desperate gamble that would require them to re-enter the world they had fled, albeit under the cloak of anonymity. They needed answers, and those answers lay beyond the desolate coastline, in the very heart of the world Damian had built. Henry, sensing her shift, nodded, his silent agreement a powerful affirmation of their shared purpose. They gathered their meager belongings, each movement deliberate, a quiet declaration of war against their own blood. The path forward was fraught with unimaginable peril, but remaining passive was no longer an option. They had to hunt for the truth, even if it meant stepping into the lion's den. Days later, a small, forgotten port town on the coast unfolded before them, its faded charm a stark contrast to the tumultuous drama within their souls. The air hung thick with the scent of salt and old fish, a grounding reality that momentarily pulled Hilda from the vortex of her thoughts. They moved with the practiced stealth of shadows, their tattered clothes and weathered faces blending into the tapestry of the town's forgotten inhabitants. Every corner held a potential clue, every weathered face a possible connection to Damian's past. Yet every shadow also harbored the threat of recognition, of discovery by their relentless children. The constant vigilance was exhausting, a gnawing anxiety that never fully receded. They observed the docks, the few bustling markets, and the quiet, unassuming storefronts, searching for any anomaly, any whisper of the name associated with the offshore account. The weight of their predicament pressed down, making simple acts like walking feel like an arduous journey through a psychological minefield. Their future hinged on a single thread of information, hidden somewhere within this unassuming coastal labyrinth. A weathered, almost illegible sign above a dimly lit storefront caught Henry's eye. Horizon Holdings, Esther 1990. The year resonated with a chilling familiarity, aligning perfectly with the date on the offshore account receipt. It was a defunct property management office, its windows grimy, its interior shrouded in dust and cobwebs, yet a faint, lingering presence seemed to emanate from within. As they cautiously approached, a sudden movement in the alley across the street froze them in their tracks. Damian emerged from the shadows, his face illuminated by a flickering street lamp, talking intently on a sleek, modern phone. Beside him, Melissa, her long, sleek. They weren't just searching for clues. They had walked directly into their children's sphere of operations, their presence an immediate, terrifying confirmation of how deeply entwined Damian's scheme truly was. The stakes had just escalated catastrophically, placing them in direct, undeniable peril, and the hunter had suddenly become the hunted. The sight of Damian and Melissa, so close, so chillingly real, sent a fresh wave of primal fear through Hilda and Henry. They pressed themselves deeper into the shadows of the alleyway, their hearts hammering against their ribs, synchronized in terror. Every instinct screamed at them to flee, but a desperate, calculating part of Hilda's mind urged caution, an opportunity to observe. They needed to understand the full scope of their children's nefarious enterprise, to gather undeniable proof before making their move. Damian's hushed conversation on the phone, his gestures precise and cold, hinted at the meticulous planning behind their betrayal. Melissa's silent presence, a picture of unnerving composure, confirmed her deep complicity. The air grew heavy with the weight of their children's dark intentions, a suffocating realization of the depth of their treachery. They watched, hidden and helpless, as the intricate web of deceit continued to unfold before their the city lights began to flicker on, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with their fears. They knew they had to act, but the how remained a terrifying, unanswered question. Their survival and the truth depended on their next critical decision. Hilda and Henry moved through the darkened streets, their purpose now sharply defined by the horrifying scene they had just witnessed. They needed to find a secure way to transmit the evidence they possessed, the crumpled receipt and their harrowing testimony, to a reliable authority. The risk of approaching local law enforcement directly felt too high, too vulnerable to infiltration or dismissal without irrefutable proof. They remembered a retired detective, a man of integrity Henry had known from his earlier career, who had relocated to a quiet coastal town further south. A flicker of hope ignited in Hilda's chest, a fragile but persistent flame against the overwhelming darkness. They navigated the labyrinthine back alleys, avoiding main thoroughfares, their path illuminated only by the distant glow of streetlights and the sliver of moon. Each step was a calculated risk, a silent prayer for safety and success in their desperate mission for justice. Their destination was an old nondescript post office, a place where anonymity could be a shield. They would send their package, a carefully compiled dossier of betrayal, by registered mail, ensuring its safe arrival to the one man they could trust. Weeks later, the news rippled through the quiet coastal town, carried on the morning breeze like a grim melody. A flurry of official vehicles, their sirens muted, converged on the Horizon Holdings office. Hilda and Henry, from a discreet distance, watched as uniformed officers entered the building, their movements purposeful and grave. Moments later, Damian and Melissa emerged, their previous composure shattered, their faces a mask of shock and dawning realization. Damian's meticulous ant posture had crumbled. They were escorted into separate police cars, the flashing, a stark contrast to their earlier arrogance. The unfolding scene was a quiet, devastating vindication, a testament to the power of truth and the relentless pursuit of justice. The once unbreakable facade of their children's power crumbled before their. Hilda felt a profound, complex wave of emotion, relief, sorrow, and an aching sense of loss for the family that could have been. Months later, the scent of fresh sea air filled Hilda's lungs as she and Henry stood on a serene, sun-drenched beach, miles away from the shadows of their past. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of. The physical scars from the fall had healed, but the emotional wounds, though still present, no longer festered with the same intensity. They had found solace in each other, their bond forged anew in the crucible of betrayal and survival. The pain of losing their children to their own avarice was a quiet ache, a permanent part of their story, but it no longer defined them. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, a testament to their enduring love and resilience. The silence between them was not heavy, but peaceful, filled with unspoken understanding and the promise of a future built on genuine trust and unwavering honesty. They watched the waves crash gently, each receding tide washing away another layer of the past, leaving behind only the pure, unblemished sand of their shared future. This was not the family they had built, but the life they had reclaimed, stronger and truer than ever before. For more stories that delve into the depths of human drama and resilience, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell.